Never stop reading Bible. Hey everyone, welcome. Today we're diving into something pretty fascinating, an ancient code for atonement. We're going to unpack the legal and spiritual system laid out in the book of Leviticus, chapters 4 through 6, and really figure out how this society thought about justice and making things right. I mean, think about it. It's a question every single society has to grapple with, right? From our own legal systems today, all the way back to ancient rituals, we've always needed a way to restore balance. So in this explainer, we're going to look at one very specific, super detailed answer that was the bedrock for a whole society thousands of years ago. So here's what we've got on tap. We'll kick things off with something called the sin offering. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of sin versus guilt. Yep, they're different. After that, we'll look at the actual rituals and rules, and then pull it all together to see the big picture. All right, let's get right into it with chapter 4. The whole system really starts with this idea of the sin offering. And let's be clear, this wasn't some optional, do it if you feel like it kind of thing. No way. This was an absolute requirement if you broke one of God's laws. You can kind of think of it as a mandatory act of accountability. It was the official way for someone to get back in good standing with God. And what's key here is it wasn't just about saying, I'm sorry. It was about doing something specific, something tangible to actually fix the problem. Okay. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. The law itself gives us this incredible window into their social structure. See, the whole idea of responsibility and the price you paid for a mistake, it wasn't a one-size-fits-all deal. It was completely scaled based on who you were in the community. And you can see that principle laid out so clearly right here. If the high priest messed up, or even the whole community as a group, it required the most expensive sacrifice, a bull. If a leader slipped up, it was a male goat. But for just a regular person, a young lamb would do. It shows you, plain and simple, the more influence you had, the heavier your actions weighed. So let's keep going, because the system builds on itself. When we get to chapter 5, things get even more specific. A really critical distinction is made between two different kinds of offerings, and it all depends on what exactly went wrong. So here's the bottom line. The sin offering, that was for when you broke one of God's direct commands. But then you have this other category, the guilt offering. That was for when you messed up with other people. You know, wronged someone or misused something sacred. It's like one offering dealt with your vertical relationship, you and God, and the other dealt with your horizontal relationships, you and everyone else. And here are some actual examples to make it real. We're talking about everything from a witness refusing to tell the truth in court to accidentally touching something unclean. Or maybe you made a rash promise you couldn't keep, or even messed with someone else's property. You can see how this code tried to cover, well, pretty much the whole spectrum of human mistakes. Okay, so we've talked about the why you'd make an offering and the what kind of offering you'd bring. Now, chapter 6 completely shifts gears. It's all about the how. This is basically the priest instruction manual, laying out the step-by-step procedures for all these rituals. Yeah, so while the first couple of chapters are about the theology, this part is pure logistics. It's all about the execution. It details the process, makes it super clear who does what, and even breaks down who gets which part of the sacrificed animal. It's all about making sure everything was done exactly right every single time. The whole process was really systematic. First, the person who did wrong brings the animal. Then, a very specific part, like the fat, which was considered the best part, was burned as the offering to God. But the rest wasn't just thrown away. Nope. The remaining meat actually went to the priests. It was their share, what sustained them so they could do their job. So, let's step back for a second. What does all of this mean when you put it together? Because when you look at these chapters as a whole, it's so much more than just a dusty old rulebook. You're actually seeing an entire worldview unfold. And I think the biggest takeaway is this. The whole system was designed to keep society in balance, to maintain both social and spiritual harmony. It gave people a clear, predictable playbook for what to do when things went off the rails. It was a way to repair not just your relationship with God, but the very fabric of the community itself. So let's just recap the big points. What we've seen is a highly structured system for making things right. A system where your accountability was literally tied to your social rank. It made a sharp distinction between offenses against God and offenses against other people. And it was all governed by these super detailed rituals, all pointing to one main goal, keeping order and harmony. And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about, doesn't it? I mean, sure, the animal sacrifices and all the specific rituals, that's all part of the ancient world. But that fundamental need for justice, for accountability, for having a way to make things right again, that's timeless. It makes you wonder, what do those systems look like for us today? This explainer was based on source material provided by the Center Studio. Thanks so much for exploring the story with us.